The Siege of Jinju was one of two battles during the Japanese invasions of Korea, the first in 1592, and the second in 1593. The Second Battle of Jinju was not as successful, and it fell to the Japanese. Prelude. Jinju Castle was an important castle that guarded Jeolla province. Ukita Hideo and Hosokawa Tadauki agreed on taking Jinju Castle because if the Japanese captured it, it would open up a new road to Jeolla, and they would be able to attack GWAKJU's guerrilla forces hiding in the area. Jeolla was also a place for plenty of loot. Ukita also agreed to recapture Changwon, a small fortress that led to Jinju Castle. Therefore, an army of 30,000 men to recapture Changwon and Jinju set out. Yu Sung-in, commander of Right Gyeongsang province, placed his army in front of the gate of Jinju. General Yu Sung-in requested a permission to enter into the Jinju. However, Japanese arquebuses reached behind the reinforcements. Kim Si-min inevitably rejected a request, and Yu Sung-in ultimately agreed to the Kim Si-min's words. The reinforcements were annihilated by the Japanese arquebuses. Siege of Jinju. The Japanese heartily approached Jinju fortress. They expected another easy victory at Jinju, but the Korean general Kim Si-min defied the Japanese and stood firm with his 3,800 men. Again, the Koreans were outnumbered. Kim Si-min had recently acquired around 170 arquebuses, equivalent to what the Japanese used. Kim Si-min had them trained and believed he could defend Jinju. The Japanese charged and began to bring ladders to scale the wall. They also brought a siege tower to try to gain the higher ground. As a counter, the Koreans unleashed massive volleys of cannons, arrows, and bullets. Surprised, Hosokawa tried another angle of approach by using his arquebuses to cover the soldiers scaling the wall. This still had no success because the Koreans ignored the bullets and smashed ladders with rocks and axes. When the Koreans began to lob mortars down at the Japanese began to lose even more men. After 3 days of fighting, Kim Si-min was hit by a bullet on the side of his head and fell, unable to command his forces. The Japanese commanders then pressed even harder on the Koreans to dishearten them, but the Koreans fought on. The Japanese soldiers were still unable to scale the walls even with heavy fire from arquebuses. The Koreans were not in a good position since Kim Si-min was wounded and the garrison was now running low on ammunition. Reinforcements. GWAKJU, one of the main leaders of the righteous armies of Korea, arrived at night with an extremely small band, not enough to relieve the Koreans at Jinju. GWAK ordered his men to grab attention by blowing on horns and making noises. About 3,000 guerrillas and irregular forces arrived at the scene. At this time, the Japanese commanders realized their danger and were forced to abandon the siege and retreated. Aftermath. The righteous army was too small to relieve Jinju, but the retreat of Japanese soldiers heartened the Koreans, and the biggest thing earned from the siege was that the Korean morale was boosted greatly. The First Battle of Jinju, along with the Battle of Hansan Island and the Battle of Harange, were regarded as the three most important battles of the war.